Okay, I'll start again. Hi, everyone. Welcome to First Wednesdays. Today we are talking about uh, surveys and including community members in surveys. I'll be honest, I did not think that we were going to get so many folks interested in this, but I'm happy to see everyone here. Uh, and so welcome. It's very exciting to have you with us. Um, I am about to take us out of screen share because this is basically just our little welcome slide to remind everyone where we are. And there's not really any slides. And so it's basically just going to be me chatting at you and answering questions. And if you have any questions, I guess during my talk, please just like come off mute, raise your hand, shout them out, put them in the chat. And also we'll have question time at the end and questions throughout. And I saw that some of you provided questions ahead of time, and I will do my best to answer them during the time I'm talking with you. And if I don't answer them sufficiently or you want some more information, please just let me know and we'll continue talking. But I'll start with like a little icebreaker. Hi, I just realized that I'm talking with you. And it says Virginia Community Voice, which is true, but my name is Dana Kiernan. I am the, I guess, lead program manager and data analyst at Virginia Community Voice. So I do a lot of the evaluation stuff and community survey things, a lot of different things, and also blueprint side of Virginia Community Voice. And so, whoops. If I pause at all, it's because I'm also monitoring the Zoom today. And so if everyone would like to just put, if you don't feel pressured to, or you can come off mute and say hello, but if you want to put in the chat like who you are and where you're from and I guess how you're feeling today, or like a cool thing that you have planned this summer, that would be neat. Currently I'll tell one fun thing about me. I've been telling all my coworkers, they're probably sick of hearing it. I'm helping my neighbor and I, we are tore down a shared fence and we are rebuilding a fence, and it's really very hard work. And I did not realize, and I'm full of bruises from using a huge auger. It was a lot. And so if you all, you can feel free to share in the chat who you are, where you're from, and a cool thing you've done this summer. That would be neat. Any questions so far or thoughts? No? Oh, hi, Lawson. Nice to see you again. Oh, 20th wedding anniversary. Congratulations. That's awesome. That's like quite a feat. That's amazing. Oh, hi. Hi, Saren. Planet RVA. Nice to see you. I see some familiar names on here too. Hi, Megan. We shout them out. And Dr. Logan. Oh, hi, Veronica. Welcome. Yeah, Veronica was just in the Grand Canyon. Oh my gosh. Oh, wow. Oh, yeah, that's a lot. That's pretty cool. Scale down, like climb down? Wow. That's wild. Wow. Please be safe. Hi, Peace. Welcome. All right, friends. Well, I'll go ahead and get started. You can all keep introducing yourself in the chat or like putting questions in there, getting each other to know you, get to know you type stuff. But I'll get started. So like I said, first we'll go through some of the things I think are most important about getting community members involved in your survey process, but then I'll also have space for questions at the end. Hi, Emily. Okay, so first and foremost, and forgive me if it sounds like I'm reading, I'm just trying to make sure that I hit all the points that I want to hit, but why do we do community surveys, right? So community surveys for us are really just an act of listening. And so I feel like a lot of you have been to our at least introductory training about our blueprint. So, we have 4 stages: listen, connect, craft, and reflect. And community surveys really come in the listening part. And so we listen really to understand what community members want and need, and then to act on what they hear. And so it's just, community surveys are just one part of our data sweet spot, which again, I'll just go through that quickly because I think a lot of you have been in our intro trainings before. And basically we use disaggregated data, historical context, and lived experience to put together to get like a robust view of different communities that we're in. And right now we're just in the South Side. And we look at community surveys as really being a part of, depending on like what you're asking in the survey, disaggregated data or historical context, and also like a little bit of lived experience, right? And so you can disaggregate the data once you get the survey, but nonetheless, here we are. I won't get too far into that because you can ask questions about that more if you want to hear more about our data sweet spot, but I think many of you have already learned about that. Okay. And so an important part of getting community members involved, I'll start with at the very beginning. So basically an overview of how we design our surveys is we first do research into what we want to find out, right? So for example, in our first community survey in 2017 and 2018, we really wanted to understand like neighborhood connections, if people knew each other, what folks most wanted and needed to thrive on the South Side. And so the things that we did first were actually look for surveys that had already been used and implemented and validated, if you will, like academically or from other communities, to see how they asked the questions, what questions they asked. And so we did some research ahead of time. So though also we weren't starting from scratch and trying to like come up with all the survey questions on our own. We leaned heavily on research to help us with those questions first. And then we involved community members in the design process. We involved community members in distributing the survey. And then in the reflection phase, what went well and what didn't go well and what could we do better. So that's basically an overview, like a brief overview. Don't worry, we're gonna get into it. So how do we involve community members? We broadly involve community members, I guess, in every part of our listening process, in our survey process, and it really starts from building to reflecting. And then more specifically, we really started working with individuals that we already had a relationship with, and specifically people. What was their question? I don't want to talk over anyone, so please do feel free to jump in. Okay. We also do a 7 seconds of silence, so if there's 7 seconds of silence, I'll just continue on. Okay. So I'll start again. We really began working with individuals in the community that Leah specifically already had a relationship with, because Leah had been organizing in Richmond for like a decade prior to starting work with Virginia Community Voice. And she had been doing one-to-ones with them, working and organizing with them and getting them out. And so Leah really already had a trusted relationship with a few people that ended up being on our steering committee. And those individuals were then able to recruit others to join our committee and join our process. And like, you don't have to specifically make a steering committee when you're creating a survey and you're wanting to involve community members, but having like a little group, a task force, a committee, something like a group that everyone can belong to and meet together is pretty helpful. And so for me, this part, and maybe for you all too, can feel a little bit like a chicken or the egg scenario. Like, to get community members involved, you have to build trust, but then to build trust, you have to get community members involved, right? And so it can feel a little bit cyclical, like where do I even start? Especially if you have like deadlines coming up or things like that, when you're like, I want to get this survey out. But really, what really I think helped us the most was taking the time to build those relationships with individuals from the community ahead of time to make sure that there was some trust built in, and then having those individuals again go out into the community to say like, hey, we're doing this process. Hey, we want to hear what you have to say about this. And so people that community members trusted were then reaching out to them to say, come join this process. We trust Leah and the people that she works with. You'll be able to trust them too. So trust is like really the most important part, right? And also because of like the power dynamics in these situations, right? And so when you're thinking about like if you're a service providing organization and you want feedback from individuals and you might be a little bit worried, or the individuals might be a little bit worried, like if they give you their honest feedback, that you might take away services. And so there's like a little bit of power dynamics in there, right? And so in these situations, where like you're an organization and you're like a single person, we like also, you have to think about too, as like someone who comes into a community to ask for feedback and input. Like, I'll just use myself as an example. I don't look like the Southside community, and that's okay, right? But it is also different power dynamics too when there's like a white person coming into a mostly Black community to say like, hey, give us your opinion on this survey. Folks might not want to be as honest with me to say like, hey, this survey is really, this really is terrible. This question doesn't make sense. Folks might just say like, yeah, it's fine, it's great. And so getting to know people ahead of time and really building that trust is really important, especially if there's differing power dynamics. And so what's helpful is to set intentions in the space. Once you've built those relationships, once you've invited community members to come in and be in the space with you, once you've done the research and gotten some questions together, when you finally have that space set up, it's really helpful to set intentions for that space and for each other. And so some of the intentions that we like to set are like group norms and stuff. And so what we say is, if there's tension, we like to describe how we work through tension. If there, what else do we say? I'm trying to remember all of our group intentions. Oh, that we believe the best in each other when we're sharing our opinions. And so, and we share that we really genuinely want full, honest feedback and opinions, because our intention is to make a community survey that really gets, or a survey in general, that really gets at the needs and wants of the community, right? And we're not listening to the community members just to collect this information, but to share it back and to act on it. And their intention is to help us get there, right? And so all of our intentions are set, and we share that, and we make sure that we know like, this is what we're here for. We're all working together towards the same goal. And for those folks who are survey designers or are leading the meetings, it really is, you have to really just let go of your ego, which can be so hard, and come in with like humility and wanting to learn from community members instead of believing that you know more about surveys or survey design or survey question, because you might, but at the end of the day, if your question doesn't make sense to community members who are there giving you the feedback, like the question isn't going to elicit the responses, or the whole survey won't elicit the responses that you want. And so you really have to just let go of the ego, even though you're like, oh, I worked so hard on these questions and now everyone's tearing them to pieces. It's okay. It'll be better on the other side, I promise. It can be hard in the moment though. And so when we meet with, like I mentioned before, what it sort of looks like inside the meetings themselves is, when we meet with community members, we already had researched the topic, we had found validated questions, and we were able to share like a first draft upon going into these like committee meetings with our steering committee. And we also provided the community members with an understanding of the intent of the entire survey. Like, why are we doing the survey? What is the point? What's going to happen with this information at the end? And how are we going to distribute this information back to the community? And also the intent of each question. And so, like, sorry if you hear my dogs. They're very upset that they can't be in the room with me right now. Apologies. And so the intent of each question, right? So I know a lot of times people get maybe concerned about answering like race or income questions, right? Because that can be kind of personal. Gender questions can be kind of personal. Or if you're asking about kids or things like that, those can be personal questions. And so you might get pushback on that, which is okay, but it also helps to say like, hey, when we get the survey results, we want to be able to break them out by demographics to say like, who with children is saying what they want in the community, or what income levels, or what education levels, or even question like, those are just the fastest questions I could think of at the moment, are the demographic ones, but providing the intent of each question can also help with community members, can also help them maybe reframe it in their mind if they're like, this question doesn't make any sense. And you're like, okay, well, this is what we're going for. And then you're able to work on that question really specifically to get at what you want to find out from community members based on that question. And so, oh my gosh, where am I in my notes here? Oh yeah. And so again, trust really helped in this situation. So community members knew that we weren't going to freak out when they say, this question doesn't make sense. This wording is confusing. That's not how I interpreted this question, which really did happen in the first round of our survey drafts in our 2017 and 2018 community surveys. And so community members really did say, I don't like this question, it doesn't make sense. And so we were able to work from there and get, excuse me, a better survey built. And so that's kind of what the meetings look like. I think we went through 3 rounds of questions before community members were satisfied with how they sounded, how they looked, and then the way that they were answering them, whether it was like a short answer or a multiple choice answer. And this really helped us ensure that they were like culturally appropriate questions, that the questions had like the right, I would say, comprehension level or reading level, because not everyone has like full high school even reading levels. And so it's important to make sure that the questions are understandable. And so it was really important for us, especially to have community members. Oh, I see a question in the chat. Lawson, I believe, sorry, it just has the initials for me, asked the question, is that intent written out in the survey, or do you rely on intent being communicated verbally when someone receives the survey from a human? We found it hard to provide intent in the survey without making it very long and worrying about someone not reading it through. Yeah, that's a really good question. We tried to ensure that the intent, at least for the entire survey, is written out like it at the top. And there's also like the consent part, our contact information to make sure that you can say like, hey, remove my response, at any time. But I'm actually glad that you asked that question, because the answer I think will come a little bit in my next part, is where we also didn't just have community members assist us with building the survey, but we also had them help distribute it as well. And so we trained community members on how to talk to their neighbors, their friends, their coworkers, their congregation members about the survey, right? So the intent part, what was the purpose of the survey? And we also taught folks how to answer the questions they got about the survey questions and the intent behind those. And so we did a combination. It was mostly at the time in person, like paper surveys that people were filling out. And so by having community members distribute it to their friends and their family, we got a really good response rate, but also having someone being able to answer the questions on the intent of both the survey and the survey questions was really helpful, to have like a human there to chat with about it, and that had been involved in the process throughout the process was really helpful. But yeah, we've also run into the fact that it can be hard to keep a survey short and like keep the brain engaged with it if you're reading so much about the intent behind the survey or behind the question, that it then becomes too long for folks. We can chat about that too if everyone else has thoughts and feelings, experiences about that. So it won't just be me talking at you guys. I'm coming close to the end of what we think is the most important parts. And then we'll do like questions and answers and sharing of experiences. And so I also want to make sure, at the time, we also did institutional review board training because we were associated with UVA and we did that with community members, and that was a lot. So if you can find ways to not have to do it because research ethics are very important, but it was a lot at the time. And we also paid our committee members no less than $20 an hour for their participation. And we also paid folks who came in to help distribute the surveys. And we entered everyone that took a survey into a raffle to be able to also have the opportunity to be compensated as well. And I think we had something like 20 different amounts of gift cards. So it wasn't just, there was quite a bit. I don't remember exactly how much we had, but that way people felt like they were also getting something, like the potential to get something out of it. And like I said before, once we were done with the survey analysis, we took the time to then share back with the steering committee and the people that helped with the designing the survey, the results. And then we also shared back with the people who helped distribute the survey, the results. And so then they could go back to their friends, family, coworkers and say, hey, remember that survey you took? Well, here's the results of this. And so we didn't just keep it for ourselves. And then we also shared like, hey, now that we have these results, here's what's going to happen with them. And here's how we're going to move forward on these different topics. And we also put them up on the website. There was a question that we had gotten ahead of time that was like, is there an online resource where Virginia Community Voice survey results and reports are shared so we can all learn from each other and not ask the same group of people the same questions that they've already been asked like repeatedly over and over? And the answer is yes. Some of that is on our website, but we are also working to like not revamp, but adjust our website to we're updating our website is the word I'm looking for, to try and figure out where that should live and how to easily find like, here's what folks said about greening, here's what folks said about neighborhood connections, here's what folks said about X, Y, or Z. That way you're not having to click around on our website to find it, because right now they're kind of in different places. But the answer is yes, we're updating our website. But it's also a way that we've distributed results back to community members is through our RVA Thrives newsletter. So folks who are really involved with us in our RVA Thrive side, they've gotten the results in emails. We put it on our website, and we've also put it out in our big newsletter. So that's another way that we do it. And then the last piece I really want to hit before we do like questions and answers and stuff is basically how community involvement made our survey better, right? And so having community members speak into our survey ensured that it was culturally appropriate, it was understandable, a good length, and that we would get the responses to our questions that we thought we would, right? So our logic was sound and people were interpreting the questions like we hoped that they would. And it also ensured that community members would actually take our survey, right? Because their friends, their family, their acquaintances, they were all asking them to do it, and they could share why it was important for them to participate. And we had a really good response rate. And so it was like astronomically helpful that we had community members in the whole process with us, right? And then at the end, what we were able to do is then begin the work for RVA Thrives, right? So we really did the survey before we actually started doing the work of RVA Thrives. And then we did get some questions. And so one of the questions we had ahead of time was, do you find in-meeting surveys to be more effective? What are the best ways to get feedback on a virtual program? And so if we do want to get survey responses in meetings, we generally do set aside time either at the beginning or the end of meetings to have people take those surveys if they're there, or we'll ask to join maybe like community association meetings to say like, hey, we have the survey, here's what it's for, and have folks take it in the meeting. So in meeting surveys, like setting that dedicated time aside really is helpful in getting a response rate. And then the best ways to get feedback on a virtual program, and I think that depends on the community. And then if anyone else has, actually this part, I feel like if anyone wants to answer these questions, they're welcome to come off mute and say like, hey, we've had this really good way that we did it and got a good response. Like, please don't just have me talk at you. But I'll start first, and it's depends on the community. Okay, yeah. So the best ways to get feedback on a virtual program, I think it depends on the community. Are they tech savvy? Are they old? Are they young? Is that how you normally engage people? And then I think maybe at the end of the day, sometimes a survey is not the best way to do it. Even though this talk is about surveys, if you are hoping to get like deep feedback, sometimes you just have to talk with people, right? And open up that line of communication to actually engage one-on-one with them. And otherwise, the best ways to get feedback on a virtual program, if you're in the virtual program, it's like I said, maybe setting aside a time at the end of it before everyone like leaves for the last session, or maybe close to the last session, providing that survey or that assessment that you're doing. Or it's maybe reaching out individually to say like, hey, how did you feel about this? What could we have done better? And if not you, because of, again, maybe power dynamics, maybe someone from your organization, it depends again if there's like services associated with it, if they're afraid of maybe losing access to those services. So there's some things to think about there. And I see Veronica, please, Veronica.
Hi there, it's great being here. I'm Veronica Reed, and I'm the director of the Leadership Academy for Virginia Community Voice. And the questions that you guys are doing are things that I deal with it on a regular basis. We live in a world where we need data. The United States is still very driven to data. We need data to also communicate with our funders at the same time. The data that is non-existing when we talk about, you know, the incognito community, the Hispanic, the immigrant community. They are not really on front of doing online surveys. So I think we have a conflict in terms of the importance of having data and the difficulty on reaching out to individuals that might have barriers in terms of mental health, but clearly also recognize the importance of being undocumented and how scary it is to answer for anybody that's going through immigration processes or is clearly undocumented, how we do that. I just think it's a conflict that we have, but in the way that we acknowledge that, we are more likely to be efficient. We want to be also transparent with people that we work with in terms of the expectations that we have with surveys. Literally, the way that the American system works, it's really driven for data, and the culture, immigrant culture, is not driven to data. So we have nurture versus nature, right? So I just want to acknowledge that conflict and be supportive and not just walk on eggshells. Acknowledge that we have a conflict. We need data, but obtaining data with the tools that exist in the United States is challenging, given that those tools do not apply to other cultures. But we have a challenge, and we can overcome it in the way that we really meet people where they are. The questions that you guys have are really practical questions. I might not be able to answer them, but what has worked for us in a way is to understand that even the questions that we're asking are not clear to people. But instead of being so like, you need to answer this, it's like, ask the question in different ways and obtain the information and transcribe that to a survey. I think I myself don't like surveys. It's hilarious that I have to do surveys, but it is the reality. And I think we're going to be more efficient if we are, one, transparent with our funders about the conflict. Two, if we are flexible and we really make people comfortable and they understand that you as a person are more important than me doing the correct survey. Because if I build trust, that will help us in the long run. So hopefully this comment is helpful. That's all I wanted to mention.
Yes, thank you, Veronica, because that's also you beat me to one of the answers of my other questions, which was where did I put it? Oh, another person asked ahead of time, are you interested, or they're interested in hearing more ways to generate engagement with online surveys in marginalized communities that don't always have equitable access to the internet, right? And sometimes, again, surveys might not be the way to go, even though this is, again, a talk about surveying. Like, if you're, oh yeah, okay, so Veronica shared in the chat, what Veronica does is to transfer the online option to a printable version, and then go meet people where they are, if you're able to, right? So you can go to them and have like tablets or printouts and stuff. But again, it might not be the best tool to use. And so there's other engagement tools like interviews or one-to-ones that might be more useful to get the information that you need. Of course, those come with, oh yeah, we also do simplify things and do talking points. That's very true too. There are, yeah, there's real constraints about going out to people, but that's, and meeting them where they are. But there's a lot of times, if you think that that might be a problem, to build that time period in that's going to be needed to go meet people where they are ahead of time. So that way, you know, like, hey, these folks don't really have access to the internet. It's really hard to get in touch with them in that way. Build in some time ahead of time. Yes, Veronica, please come back.
Then I want to do one more example. I was doing
Sure.
a job with a museum, and they had the typical survey which says, what do you have before you came to this and after? You know, I talked to the organizer and said, this is not going to fly. It's going to fly if you force people. They're going to answer, but everything's going to be great, 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 great. Everything is going to be great. If you want honest feedback, this survey that you have done for the last 10 years might not be the most efficient. So what we did is, yes, we're going to answer your survey, but in additional to that, I did one-on-one meetings, and I've in a comfortable environment where I could really understand, not people saying everything is great, I learned everything. But if you take the time to interview people one-on-one, you will really have what matters and not just answering the question, because the most oppressed communities, they're always going to tell you everything is great, even if it's not great. So in order to overcome that, we develop trustworthy relationship, and we just talk to people one-on-one and allow them and role model leadership. So the tool is not really just a survey, it's a way of role modeling leadership and why the voice is important. And this would be a good opportunity to say, hey, the bathroom wasn't clean, or hey, your class was incredibly technical. So really just role model a bit and just meet people where they are.
Yes, Flo. Oh, I'm so happy everyone's sharing. Yes.
Sorry that my camera is not, I don't know if you can see me, but yeah, I'm really grateful for Veronica's point. I have also worked with populations where English is not their first language for decades. And, you know, many of them are undocumented and people who are historically marginalized in many different ways. And I just wanted to kind of piggyback right on what Veronica was saying to make one specific point about the survey creation process and implementation, is, as both Dana and Veronica were stating, the power of developing relationships with the community before extracting data, before acquiring data, is there are no words to kind of express how important and powerful that is, right? So part of our model, as Dana was saying in the beginning, is going to be the listening and the connecting, right? And we're going to listen and we're going to connect as a way to develop these relationships further, and as a way to sincerely get to know what folks are feeling and thinking about specific issues, as Veronica was saying. So I think the point that I'm trying to make is that data collection will look different depending on the population that you're working with. Mm-hmm. And a huge component of that on that data collection will always be the trust building with the community first, or at the same time that this listening is happening.
Yes, please. That means I see your hand up. Go on, please.
Yes, I just wanted to kind of make a statement as well as get any feedback that you guys could share. I work with surveys, focus groups, key informant interviews, and I echo exactly what Veronica and Florencia just said. I do English and bilingual groups when I do face-to-face as well as virtual. And one of the challenges that I've found most is dealing with things are too long, they're too intrusive, and they're too confusing. And if you want an honest answer from people, then they have to feel that there's transparency and that they know where their data is going.
Mhm.
Because one of the things I think, at least from a cultural standpoint, is we tend to be a suspicious people because we don't know exactly what's happening with some of the information that you ask us. And a lot of what I deal with is the digital questionnaires. So they're on iPads. And once people start off, the questions are easy, but then you get caught and you can't get to the next one and you can't back out. So people kind of feel trapped. So just as Veronica said, you start saying great, 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 or it was wonderful because you want to get out of it. So my group would be, for instance, I did about 4,000 and some surveys in Miami recently, and I'm getting ready to go back. But the hardest question on the survey always tends to be demographics. They don't allow you to pick but one thing. And as we are a melting pot of people, it's getting more and more difficult. So if I am Afro-Latina and I have to decide, am I going to be Black or am I going to be Hispanic? That right there stops my person from going any further into their survey. And then they'll go, never mind, I don't really want to fill it out. So any suggestions or tips would be helpful.
Yes. Okay. I'm glad that you brought that up because that was also one of the questions that we got ahead of time, which was, it was just a bunch of words, but I'm guessing that it's how do you like frame? Sure. Yeah. Oh, so many good questions are coming in the chat too. Okay. So framing an order of questions and distribution and sharing results. Okay. So first, like, was just being shared, the questions should be culturally appropriate and like the least confusing as possible, which again, having community members involved in building your survey will help ensure that they're not confusing and that they are culturally appropriate. And then usually for the order of questions, we do questions that require the least brain power first, but that does not mean the demographics. We usually put those at the end. And so the easiest questions first that require the least amount of brain power, questions that feel less revealing about a person, like asking questions that are really sensitive or like about sensitive topics. We usually put those towards the end. And we usually put like, well, we do that. Some of the demographics also coming at the end are helpful because they can be priming questions. Like there's been studies done that show asking for gender. Oh yeah, that's a good point, Veronica, too. Like asking for gender ahead of doing math problems leads to results of like specifically for women doing not as well on the math problems because of the stereotype gets in your head like, oh, I'm a woman doing math and the stereotype is that women aren't as good as math. And so now I'm going to think about that as I'm doing the math problems after answering that gender question. But when the gender question is asked after doing the math problems, people's brains are not primed for that. And so they're able to do better on the math section. Does that make sense? I forget the exact survey or study, I can find it. And so we generally ask all of those like priming, gender, race, et cetera, questions at the end. And for race, we also always provide the option of checking more than one or answering, like I prefer to answer myself. And we do that also with gender too, to make sure that folks like are able to self-identify when they want to, or check if they want to, if it's something easy, like white, easy peasy, just click that. But if you would prefer to self-identify, you can also do that as well. And then, okay, let me see. I think those were all the questions that we had. Oh, distribution. We had talked about that already. And then I'm going into the chat, friends. Okay, so the first one was, what are actionable first steps to start a trusting relationship with a new community from zero? That's a really great question. And one of the ways to do it is perhaps going to a community meeting, like a civic association meeting, or seeing what events are in the area, and then reaching out to the person that's like perhaps in charge of that event or in charge of the civic association. I'll just use the civic association because that's how we generally work on the South Side, but any sort of community group, and asking that person to meet for just like a coffee or virtually, since it's still pandemic, everyone, just a heads up. So virtually or for a coffee or for lunch or something like that. And taking the time to just like, hey, say, hey, I'm interested in the work that you're doing. And here's the reasons why I'm reaching out to you, being really transparent about why you're reaching out. And then trying to do basically, I guess, like a one-to-one with them to share, like, here's what's interested for me in this community. Does that match with your self-interest for making this community better or doing work in this community or for within your neighborhood? And then at the end of a one-to-one, you're supposed to ask, like, who else can I talk to about this? And then they'll start to connect you with others. And so that's an actionable first step to start at least a relationship. And then it does take a long time to really build out that trust. So to build the trust, you have to be consistent, open, transparent, and then go from there. I know that was a very fast answer to a process that takes a long time, but it's really, really worth it. Like we've heard before. And then a question from Dan, can you give examples of confusing surveys or how we might inadvertently state questions in ways that are confusing? Yeah. Okay, so we recently just had a leadership, we're doing a community, I guess a smaller community survey about starting our leadership academy and our healing hub. And so in our leadership academy, Virginia Community Voice, we wanted to know, like, what parts of leadership do people want to learn more about? And so Veronica and I worked very closely together to figure out the best ways to ask those questions and like get the different components of leadership in an understandable way for the Hispanic community. So like, for example, in American culture, when you think like public speaking, I tend to think immediately like you're speaking in front of people, you're speaking to like your congressman, your city council person, you're speaking in public about something that matters to you. That's public speaking. But that doesn't translate the same for the Hispanic community. And so just to have public speaking on there as a response wasn't going to work out. And so Veronica and I had to work closely together to figure out what the intent behind that question sounds like, or what it is like. And so that's just like a very brief example. And in other ways, double barrel survey questions. Y'all, also, I have a really great book. It's going to be very dorky. Let me find it. I have it next to me all the time. For writing non-confusing survey questions. I can send this resource out later, but it's like a little book called Designing Quality Survey Questions. And this book will help you. And it talks, even goes through distribution. There's also like a little workshop I went to about survey questions. But some other ways that questions can be confusing or asking double-barreled question, it's like, do you agree that trees are beautiful and tall? And so like, which part am I agreeing with? Is it that trees are beautiful or that they're tall? Because not all trees are tall, and also not all trees are beautiful. And so making sure that you're having like really clear, specific questions is one way to do it. Oops, I see another message. Oh yeah, I'll put the name of the book in the chat. That's great. Any other questions? You guys can feel free to come off mute if you would like, or anyone else want to share their experiences about asking non-confusing questions or getting community trust while I put the name of this book. Yes, Veronica, please.
Yes, I want to share that sometimes we are working with agencies that have a certain like educational process, and then you are working on a professional level. And when you are doing the survey, you are around other professional people that have the concept of what is power mapping, what is leadership, what is resilience, like all those concepts that you can translate, but people might not have a full understanding what it really means to be a leader, what it means to be resilient. I mean, translation is really not enough. So what I do is time consuming but more efficient, right? So when you just simplify the sentence, you want to try to see, what do you really want out of this question? Like Dana said, if you are asking 3 things at once, less is more, right? So then sometimes we are under pressure to do 20 questions or 30. That's really too much. People, if they're willing to give us the time for a survey, we want to do it in a way that's efficient and that give us time to explain why the survey matters. That it's more important than actually getting the exact outcome that we expect out of a survey. So I think less is more, short sentences. And when we do the surveys, really not just discuss it around professionals or PhD holders that might have really good intentions, but we might not deliver. So it is really good idea to just go to the community and see, did you understand this question? And rather than making assumptions, just really try to work through it and try to meet people where they are. I think that could be a little helpful, right?
And also piloting the survey too with a small group of people ahead of time. This is also helpful to see like how they answered the questions, and then what they thought about while they were answering the questions. That's always helpful. Yes, Evie, please come back and share your experiences.
Sure. I also wanted to state that something that is useful for the more tech savvy people is to have a QR code associated with the questionnaire for those who want to go ahead and do it on their own. But again, as pointed out, it's also nice to have something printed so people can see. And keeping that in mind, it's been helpful to allow people to know how many questions they're about to answer, because sometimes people feel like you've almost tricked them if you say, well, you're only going to do 10, but then there are 5 parts to each question, and now they feel like they've been kidnapped. So that is crucial for that. And then another thing was that if there's ever an incentive and getting people's emails, that's another piece that's I think we need to be transparent about, as mentioned, because you don't want someone to feel like they have now given their email and will be bombarded with unwanted emails just because they were hoping to win, a prize. And I think that if you are offering a prize or some type of drawing, that it's very important to make sure that you tell people this is the date that the prize will be drawn. These are your, like this is how many people were actually doing it. It's not like it's a national thing or something that misleads people, because if you think you're about to win, a car or, a pocketbook or whatever, but then you find out that they're going to be doing this throughout the next 2 years and you're just falling in a pot. It's very different than finding out that on Thursday at 12 o'clock, the drawing will be done randomly through computer or something. And this is how we'll contact you. And we won't contact you unless you win, because I think people feel tricked when you force them to put an email in or a phone number at the end of the survey when you told them that they just had to answer questions.
I agree with that statement. I don't like to provide my contact information because I never know how it will be used. Especially if you're asking for people's contact information, don't then add them to your newsletter list. I would be annoyed if that happened to me. Or don't put them on the list for donations or asking for donations. If you're getting that information from them just for that one specific thing, make sure it stays with that one specific thing. And if you would like for them to be involved in something else, like if there was a writing question that was their answer was really inspiring or it was really thought-provoking and you want to be able to use it for a presentation, I don't know, go back to that person to say, hey, this answer elicited these thoughts from us. Would it be okay if we use it for this? And then if they say no, they say no. And then if there's no way to contact them or you can't get in contact with them, I would not use it. Make sure that their information stays within the confines of the data gathering.
Yes, and I just wanted to also add the size of the print, because that was a challenge. There are some people who just can't see things as clearly. So to have a backup maybe that's enlarged a little bit, because we had some people that had some visual impairments.
We had the same thing. And then we also noticed that in one of our community surveys that folks would share, oh, I don't have my glasses, could you read it for me? So be prepared to read it for them. But also that was kind of code for not actually being able to read. And so just be prepared for that as well. You might have to read questions, and some folks don't know how to read, and that's okay. You just have to read it for them. Lawson, I see you're ready.
Yeah, I've got a question. It's a little more, it's less practical, and it's okay if we don't have time for it, but just wanted to know, you all or Macro on the call, like, we're using the term like the community,
Mhm.
and, thinking about how we define that.
Yeah.
There's Southside. Well, Southside's a large, part of our community, and when you are surveying about any issue, that the trust and the who's asking them and the whatever, like that, the representation and diversity of what you're getting when somebody wants to know, well, what does the community think about getting a casino, for example.
Mhm.
It's like, well, there's people who feel very differently about that, and they still are community members. I don't know, just like, I guess, like, as you think about gathering information from largely defined communities, and then, I live in one where, like, does the community, if you've moved in the last 6 months, but you're a resident, you are a community, but you have a very different perspective and different needs and wants potentially than somebody who's lived here for 20 years or 50 years.
Mhm.
I don't know. So I know that's not exactly a pointed thing, but I'm just kind of curious how you all think about that when you're defining like the community, and then what the survey represents when we say, well, we asked people about this and the community thinks this or believes this.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. That's actually a very poignant question. I think, especially if we use the example of the casino, right? So for us in that space, the community that we were thinking about was the community that was going to be most affected by the placement of the casino. So it was potentially going to be in Southside. So when we wanted to chat with people and say, what does the community feel about this? It was the most directly affected community that we were really worried about or wanted to hear from. And then as you go farther out, like, the Richmond community overall is going to be affected by this. So what do people feel like in East End and West End and North Side, right? What do they all feel about this casino? We did want to hear, I'm saying it would be interesting to hear what everyone else in Richmond overall had said, but who is being most directly affected by it? It was the folks potentially on South Side. And so we wanted to hear mostly from them. And so that's how we generally like to see, when we talk about community, it does help to define ahead of time who you most want to hear from, which community do you want to hear from. That should be done in the beginning, built into the process as you go. But then making sure that you also leave space for others who maybe don't fit that exact mold that you're looking for to also answer, to see what their responses are. But generally, we try to think of the community, when we say it like that, as the most affected by the issues that we're working on. And then anyone else that has thoughts about that would be welcome to share. Well, thank you all so much. I know we're like right at time almost. And so I'll do, maybe Flo, can I turn it over to you, or is that okay to do our last, our plug? Okay, let me share my screen one more time.
Absolutely. I feel a little embarrassed about
You can't
the-
see.
the situation in the camera, but
But
that's
that's
okay.
what Flo looks like, so.
Yeah, well, sometimes. Sometimes I much rather that you look at the picture than me right now. But yeah, so thank you, Dana. Thank you for this beautiful, really informative and powerful discussion. We understand how important it is to have guidance when it comes to data acquisition, so that it doesn't become the data extraction that we're really trying to move away from, right? So because we are equity builders and we like to walk the talk, we are constantly learning the best ways and most equitable ways to engage our neighbors and communities that we work with. these are topics that we have come to have a level and expertise on, and we would love to welcome you for further training with us in this specific theme. So we please contact me. Oh, my email's not there, but if we can put it on the
Yeah, I'll
chat.
put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Please feel free to contact me. We have, it's not up on the website as such specifically. I mean, we have our organizational equity improvement process, and that kind of covers everything. But I did want to mention specifically and be intentional about the fact that a process, a coaching process and a training process to help you get there when it comes to equitable data acquisition with communities is available, and we can guide you and work with you both in what it would look like with Latino community and the, you know, English second language community and historically marginalized communities in general. So my email's on the chat. Feel free to reach out. Thank you.
All right, y'all, that's it about. Unless there's any last questions, we're happy to stick around and answer, or just like say hi to folks that are here if we haven't seen you in a while. But otherwise, yeah, reach out to us if you have more questions. And thanks so much for coming and sharing your insights.